Hi everyone, my name is Loren Elia, and today I'm going to talk about how we shifted my company, HoneyBook, from being a sales led company to a product led organization. But before we dive in, I want to give you a little bit of an intro about myself. So, as I mentioned, I am the director of product marketing here at HoneyBook. Before then, I was at Weebly, which was acquired by Square, doing product marketing. Before that, I was an Infogram as their head of marketing, which was acquired by Prezi. And I also hold an MBA from UCLA, and I am a product led champion. What all of these companies have in common, except for Guild, is that they are mostly product led. Before it was maybe a term that was as popular as today. But I've learned a lot through the years and through working at these companies. And I am here to share some of the learnings I've had. And I hope they are useful for you as well. But before we get started in the actual tactics or strategies that can help you shift from sales to product led growth, let's talk a little bit about how we got here. So, a few years ago, most sales were done top down. So, you had to find your CTO, CIO, at a big company, and you had to be able to get in front of them, convince them of the value of your product, and they would deploy or make sure everybody at their company adopted your software. As time passed, it kind of changed and became bottoms up. So you would find the right user at the company. You would start by approaching them, and then you would let them become your champion and convince the CTO or CIO of purchasing your software for the whole company. Where we're at today is even one step further from there, which is product led. And what this basically means is that you don't have to reach out, like a salesperson doesn't need to reach out to a potential user and convince them through a slide deck about how awesome your product is. What you do is you let your product do all the talking. And this basically means that you use other channels to drive awareness of your solution, and you have mechanisms for people to easily try and evaluate your product, and then they subscribe, and then they share it with the rest of their organization. Now, why are we here? Does it not make sense anymore to have salespeople call up people, call them, or send them cold emails, and then hope that they can get someone on the phone and then let them through a lengthy, 6-month purchase process? There's two trends happening right now in the world. The first one is people are becoming a lot more savvy, and that's everyone from your mom and pop store owner to your big company user, marketer, or whatever, whoever your target user is. So with that, people are way more comfortable just playing around, tinkering with things, and trying to figure out if it works for them. The second one is that cost of acquisition has gone up over the years with social media getting more saturated and just kind of salaries going up, and so CAC is being going up, and so the CAC to LTV ratio is going down, and that makes companies less attractive. And so the magic of product led growth is that you can propel your company's growth without necessarily investing more on headcount to achieve that. Um, but let's start by defining what product led growth is. It's defined as the go to marketing strategy that relies on using your product as a main vehicle to acquire, activate, and retain customers. Um, this definition is from product led, and it has at its core that it is a go to market strategy. And so, who leads go to marketing strategies? Product marketing. And that is why, in my mind, we should change product led growth to product marketing led growth. This is how strongly I believe that product marketing is actually at the very center of driving growth in this way for companies. And why is that? Because the product led strategy, it relies mostly on understanding customers, communicating with them, and then delivering value to them. And this is through, your value propositions, your product experience, your brand experience, even, and through product education. And these are all functions or aspects that product marketing touches every day. And so today I want to tell you how we did it at HoneyBook. I joined HoneyBook 3 years ago, and when I joined, we had a sales team, a pretty big sales team, and the marketing team was decent sized, not that big, but decent. And we did definitely rely on salespeople to talk to prospective users and convince them to use a product. Over the last 3 years, we have made a bunch of changes that actually have allowed us to completely transition our sales team. And they don't do sales anymore at all. What they do is product education. And so they are happier. They find their jobs very satisfying. And it is also more effective for us to acquire users through our own product. And so I'm going to tell you 7 things that we did, and hopefully these will help you as well do this transition or make this transition at your company. Just quickly, before we dive into that, PMM at HoneyBook basically does these 3 things. We have 3 stakeholders: the market, the user, and the product. And what we do is we listen to them and talk to them. And so when we are listening to the market, we're doing things like doing marketizing research or competitive research. When we are listening to the user, we are doing surveys, we're running betas, we are gathering feedback. And when we're listening to a product, we are becoming the experts on the product so that we can accurately communicate its values and its benefits. On the other side of the coin is talking to our stakeholders. And so we talk to our users through our go-to-market strategies, through our channels, our paid, our organic, our product, etc. And we communicate, new features or values, benefits of our product to our users. And we talk to the product by providing, again, that feedback that we collect from the channels in a way that is easy for our product team to act on. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as well later. So back to our 7 strategies. The first one is understanding the user. One of the key things that we did at HoneyBook when I joined was we did a very extensive pricing and packaging research. And as part of the pricing and packaging research, we developed quantitative personas. And so I have heard a lot or read a lot about personas, and there is sometimes we fall into creating qualitative personas. So we kind of like talk to users, try to bucket them, but we don't really use data to analyze these personas in the market or in our user base. And this is, if anything, if you take one thing away from this chat today, well, 1 or 2 things. One of them is this: is that you need to quantify your personas. Hire an agency, let them help you do this correctly. We use Profitwell; they were really good at it. And so from this research, we basically developed 4 personas, and we identified our 2 segments that were most profitable for us, and also where we had the best product market fit. So those were the segments where people were also getting the most benefit from our product. And so it's again, like, I think that's the beauty of product marketing, is that you always are trying to strike that balance between, good for the company and good for the user, and it has to be both always at the same time. And so the identification of our personas completely shifted the strategy of the company, from our product development to our go-to-market strategy to our support strategy. Every single aspect of the company now is centered around these personas. And again, like I think this is something like, like you will read in any blog post, identify your personas, they're so important. I think what was fundamentally different for us is that we used data, hard data, to define these personas. Um, and we defined them in the market with people that were not our users, and then we defined them within our users as well. We're able to segment our user base. And that's why I think it was so powerful. Our data science team then also developed an algorithm that would help us identify trialers through signals that were publicly available that helped us predict whether a member would fall in which segment and whether they would be part of the segment that is the better product market fit for us. So again, like it's not just kind of developing the personas, but how you use them and how you enable other teams to act on these personas. The second, and this is the second takeaway that if you take away only two things out of this whole chat, this is the second one. Experiment. Always be experimenting. We have here in the marketing team one thing that we call a batter's box. And it is a meeting we have every week where we share experiments that we have run. And what this does is that there is a culture across our whole team of always be testing, testing, testing. It's called the batter's box because the emphasis is in conducting the experiments, conducting them well, not in having successful experiments. And so it's less important whether the experiment was successful or not. It's more important what we learned from it. And so same as batters never hit 100% of balls that are thrown at them. It is not the expectation that all 100% of experiments will be successful. It is only the expectation that we will learn from it and we will share it with other people. A few things about experimentation. The first one is you should always have a control. I know this sounds obvious, but I've seen so many experiments without a control. What's more, I've seen tools out there in the market that lets you run A/B tests where there's no control. It's like test A and test B, and there's no control. And then you can't even understand if what you're doing has an incremental impact or not. So always, always, always have a segment of people that is not exposed to your experiment. Always, always, always as well, make sure that your experiments uh, reach statistical significance. Do not call an experiment until it has. So you have to be patient. Otherwise, you're making decisions with incorrect information. And the third one is, I guess, a question that I get asked a lot is how do you ensure that you can run enough experiments at the same time? Because running more than one experiment with the same audience, it's two variables that you're changing, and therefore the validity of your experiment can get questions. Then you don't know if like it was this thing that improved the performance or it was the other thing. And so what we did here at HoneyBook is that we created a universal holdout group, I guess, where we gave every person who joined HoneyBook from the minute they become a trialer, a number 1 through 100. And so what we do is that we segment our tests based on these numbers, and that way we can always ensure that we are not running two experiments on the same audience or on the same segment. So if one experiment is running on segments 1 through 10, then we can easily just say, the next experiment is going to run on segments 10 to 30. And that way you can accelerate the velocity in which you are running experiments while ensuring that the conclusions that you're drawing are accurate. Third big strategy is focusing on the first user experience. This is basically, okay, your user, came to your product, they're trying it out, and you want to ensure that their trial is successful. Another question that I get very often when people are starting to dive into product-led growth is, okay, but how do you ensure that people that have different processes can understand, and be successful with your product. And I also hear a lot like that's why you need a salesperson, because then customers really think that they're unique, and so they want a person to walk them through how to customize the product to their experience. And I hear this a lot, especially from enterprise customers. I'll tell you one thing: our audience is SMBs, and very, very tiny SMBs. They're solopreneurs. And they as well think that their process is unique and that they can't use just an out of the box solution. What we have done is that we have made an onboarding that really helps them see themselves in their process in HoneyBook. And one of the first things we do is we ask them for a profile picture, and we ask them to upload their logo and their brand colors and their company address. And then we take this information and we put it everywhere in the product. And so when they are seeing a sample invoice, they immediately see themselves reflected there because they see their logo, they see their company address, and everything they see and need is right there. We have also developed kind of different onboarding paths where, depending on what you came to HoneyBook looking for, we will give you different samples or sample experience. So, for example, we ask them during onboarding if their first and biggest goal that they're trying to do is, get invoiced and paid, or if they're trying to schedule and vet leads. And depending on what they answer to that question, we either show them a company info intro packet or an invoice and contract. And that way they do feel that our tool is for them, and that's how we get them to organically subscribe and be successful with our tool. The fourth strategy is pricing and packaging. And I have found that a lot of startups kind of like don't pay a lot of attention to pricing and packaging. And this is for a good reason. When you start out, you want to make sure that people are trying your product. It doesn't really matter that much whether you are being able to generate revenue from them. But every startup reaches a point where they do want to start generating revenue and starting to become profitable, or at least be in that path to become profitable. And that's where pricing and packaging becomes so important. Also, because there is no one to negotiate here, the pricing needs to be right. The pricing needs to match the user expectations and the user value. Because when you have a salesperson discussing terms with their prospective customer, they can negotiate. If the pricing isn't exactly right, the salesperson can give them a discount or something, and you can kind of like push them through the line that way. When you are doing product-led growth, you rely on your product only to do that selling. And so that's why it's so important that you do the research to figure out what the right pricing and packaging is. And again, we did this very extensive study where we understood our segments, and then we also understood what features were important to which segment, and then what was their willingness to pay for that set of features. And again, this is all quantitative. It's based on market research. It's not just kind of like our best guess. And again, like I very much recommend that you spend the money to get a good solid research in this field. And so with having the right pricing and packaging together with promotional offers, seasonal promotional offers, we were able to more than 4x our user base over the last 3 years and 2x the last year. So what we implemented was different price points, and as well as continue to write promotions. The fifth strategy is acquisition channels. For us here, really, product-led growth starts with the first time a user sees or interacts with our brand. So product marketing works really closely with our performance, organic, referral, and product teams to make sure that we have the right information, and depending on where in the user journey they are. And so for our performance channels, for example, we work really closely with them to create ads that have the right benefits as well as the right features at that first touch point. And then with our referral and influencer programs as well, we have a very strong influencer program that is helping us again because it is people that use our product, that help us communicate the value and the benefits of our product with some social proof. We have a strong referral program, and we do also have a little bit of virality embedded into the product because service providers can add other service providers to collaborate with them in the product, and that's how we kind of build that virality. The sixth strategy, and potentially the most important one, is product education. So, again, because you don't have a person necessarily holding people's hands and teaching them about every little thing about your product, you have to make sure that there is a cohesive product education strategy in place. This table here is an example of a product education plan we had last year, where you can see it is a completely cross-functional collaboration. There's PMM here, there's customer success, there's community, there's growth, there's life cycle, there's customer support, there's sales here. We still had a sales team back then. And there's our influencer channel as well. We call them educators. And so here the magic lies in making sure you have the right communication or the right education at the level that the user needs it, depending where they are in their journey, as I mentioned. Also, another key thing here is having the right timing to communicate this product education. So this initiative we have called micro targeted comms basically is event based emails and in product pop-ups. And what we have done is we have mapped our most important events in the product, or pretty much all events that a user can do in the product. And what we do is we trigger an email or an in-product pop-up suggesting to them either what the next step is or some other sort of education that we have learned that they need right there. And we have been incredibly successful with this tactic. We were able to more than double the adoption of our scheduling feature versus our control audience by implementing this strategy. It's basically when they were trying to, they scheduled a meeting manually, we would just have trigger a notification saying, hey, we have a scheduling tool. It makes it a lot easier for you to schedule meetings like this with less back and forth. Go ahead and give it a try. And we were very, very successful with driving adoption of that feature because of that. The other tactic we use that was pretty successful as well is Jab Cross Hook. And this is a cross-functional collaboration between our support team, our customer success team, and PMM. And what we did is whenever someone reached out to our support team with a question, we had a canned response to them. And then that would trigger an event in our lifecycle tool, which would trigger an email, and then it would also pass the signal onto our account management team. And so they would reach out if they were within a certain segment to provide further help. So that was super, super successful as well. Other tactics that proved to be quite successful as well in driving adoption as well as acquisition were webinars, our Facebook group, courses, and templates. It's hidden under my little face thing, but templates have been also a very good tool to provide that hands-on product education that we were trying to give our users. The seventh strategy is your feedback loop. And so here is where you want to collect all the information, all the feedback that people are hearing, your customer-facing teams are hearing, and you want to give that back to the product team. Now, one challenge that I've seen that most startups at least struggle with is how do you even classify all this information in a way that is actionable and is not overwhelming to the product team. So this has evolved a little bit over the last few years at HoneyBook. The first thing we implemented as a product marketing team was a kind of rating scale where we would classify feedback on whether this was a feature request, product education needed, or UI issue. And then to that, we would add a what is the value prop that this issue is hurting. So if we, like one of our key value props is staying organized. And if there was like a feature request or a bug or a lack of product education that was hurting that value prop, that kind of like gave it more weight in the importance than others that maybe like a secondary or a tertiary value prop. And so that really helped us prioritize where we needed to work. And as you may have noticed, one of the things that was there was product education. And that's where we also took some of, accountability for fixing those issues. So it wasn't just like, hey, product, here are things, go fix them. It was like, oh, look, this is a product education issue. Product marketing is responsible for product education. So we are going to take this on and make sure we close that gap. Over the time, this system has evolved a little bit. And we have evolved our tagging system for tickets, but it has kind of shifted a little bit more into the hands of our user research team. But the principle stays the same of like collecting feedback and making sure you give it back to a product team in a way that is actionable for them. To sum up, product marketing is at the very center of enabling product-led growth. Why is that? Because we focus a lot of time in doing user understanding and ensuring a great user experience. We spend a lot of time experimenting. We have strong pricing and packaging. We work with our acquisition channels to ensure messaging and value props are consistent across all channels, and we focus really strongly on product education. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found all of these valuable. If you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as Loren Elia. So feel free to ping me if you have any other questions or if you want to continue talking about product-led growth. I'm also a champion, as I mentioned, at the product-led community. So you can find me there. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.